All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the old fire station, and welcome back to the 2026 Bocas Lit Fest, third day in our program. Very full and busy day today, like tomorrow. Glad to see you all here for this discussion, which I think is an important one and could be quite a fiery one, depending on how the conversation goes. My name is Nicholas Laughlin. I'm a member of the Bocas team. Happy to welcome you here. And I'm also very happy about this event and the one that follows in the fire station because it is a collaboration with the National Museum and Art Gallery. And I'd like you to give the National Museum and Art Gallery a round of applause for the work that they do and for having the vision to work with us on this particular event. Now, I'm sure many of you know that the museum building has been closed for a while because it's being restored, an important work in progress, and we're all hoping it will open soon. But because the building is closed, that doesn't mean that the museum isn't doing anything. They still have all of their collections of historic artifacts, artworks that need to be taken care of. There's a lot of planning. They're planning for what's going to be in the building when it reopens. And the museum staff obviously want to keep engaging with the public. That's the whole point of having a museum, right? It's not to lock the things up in a vault. It's to make sure that their artifacts and the stories that the artifacts tell can be accessible to people. So I think this morning's event is one way to do that. And I know that they've got some other plans they're working on to make sure that even though the museum building next to Napa, opposite the Memorial Square, may be physically closed, that the material that they're responsible for and the stories they're responsible for can still get out into the public. So we've got a two-part session this morning. This first one is a big ideas panel. And if you're a festival regular, you will know that we've done these big ideas panels at the festival from the beginning. So we do many sessions that are focused on literary writing, fiction, poetry, spoken word, all kinds of books. But we've always had these opportunities in the festival to debate other topics, which could be anything from politics to culture to sport to history. And the topic we're going to talk about this morning is heritage. But not just in the sense of heritage being, it's nice to have old buildings like the one we're in, and we should take care of them. We're going to talk about some of the thorny and difficult issues around heritage, including how we define it. What are the things that are worth declaring part of our national heritage? How do our ideas about that change over time? Just because we've always venerated an object or a person or a name, does that mean we must continue to do that? How should our ideas evolve? And how should institutions evolve? So these are all kind of tricky and difficult issues, but they play out in very real ways in the public. Very practical example, not that far away off in this direction, there used to be a statue of Christopher Columbus, which was taken down by the city last year. It's a very controversial object, a very controversial monument, and I think there's still a lot of controversy about it. So I think that, for instance, is a very practical instance of something that is worth debating in public and worth thinking about how our ideas change over time. But anyway, I'm not the expert here, so let me stop talking. What I'm going to do now is hand you over to the moderator, the chair of the session, who is Kara Roopsingh. Kara is a curator herself. She's actually, her office, her museum is right over there. I can see it from where I'm standing through the windows. It's the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Museum. That's where she's currently based. But she has a long experience working in this field in various aspects of heritage. And she's got three extremely knowledgeable and happily very opinionated people on stage who she will introduce. We are happy to have them here with us this morning, and I'm going to hand over now. Welcome them with some applause, and let's get the conversation started.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Good morning, everyone. It's so exciting to be here in this panel. Just a quick note about some of the panelists we have here. Next to me, we have Dr. Rita Pemberton, who's a former senior lecturer and head of Department of History and Deputy Dean, Student Affairs in the Faculty of Humanities and Education at UWI St. Augustine. She's a past president of the Association of Caribbean Historians and was a member of the CSEC Caribbean History Examining Team. And I feel like her bio can go on and on. But just to note, she was also the chairman of the committee to review the placement of statues, monuments, and signage in Trinidad and Tobago. And she continues to research and publish on the history of Tobago, because I call her for everything about Tobago, and is currently working on the history, heritage, and legacies of the people of Tobago. So welcome, Dr. Pemberton. And next to her, we have Margaret McDowall, who was a past chairman, first deputy chair, and then chairman of the National Trust from 2013 to this year. So Margaret McDowall is also a professional planner for over 35 years, and she co-edited the National Physical Development Plan. She created the National Housing Lead Bank, and she's just been well known, I think, in the heritage space. Margaret McDowall, welcome. And right on the end there, we have Tracy Assing, who is a writer, filmmaker, and researcher whose storytelling is centered on her indigenous roots. She has written extensively about her heritage and as a member of Trinidad's indigenous community. She wrote and produced The Amerindians, which is the first feature documentary on indigenous survival in the English-speaking Caribbean, and her essay on Accounted For appears in the Commonwealth Writers Anthology, and So Many Islands was the only non-fiction essay included in the collection, and most recently her essay Invisible Native, with excerpts from her poem On Earth, was included in the Caribbean Review of Gender Studies. So welcome, Tracy. All right, so to open up the discussion today on our panel, we're going to look at confronting heritage. Basically, you've been seeing internationally a rethinking of how heritage is interpreted, how it is discussed, how it is displayed in many different institutions. And you have examples like what Nicholas spoke about locally. But what does that mean for us here in our local context with very different local realities to what's happening internationally? Sometimes on my Instagram feed, I see different museums doing different activities. So just yesterday, I saw the New York Museum had a big screen. You can picture a big screen with a statue. And the exhibit was ropes that people who are just visiting the museum can pull down this virtual statue. And there's these all sorts of ways of rethinking. Either we leave up things and reinterpret, or we take down and we do a display. There's endless possibilities to this discussion. So I'm going to start today by asking, how can institutions rethink their role without losing their historical integrity? Anyone can jump in.
Asking me to start because they think I talk a lot, so I do. Well, that's an interesting question. In fact, I thought you were going to ask, the first question you were going to ask is, how, since we're in a writers' conference, we are talking about heritage and what is the connection? So I thought that's what it is, so that'll come to the audience in a little while. Okay, how? You know, last night, I went to the Thanksgiving of the St. Francis Church in Belmont. It's the Thanksgiving because they just finally finished completely paying for their entire renovation. Yeah, so I think I saw you there. I saw you there, sir. $20 billion. Yes. And that is the interesting thing, because you see people ask, well, why should we spend this kind of money for this kind of work? I mean, you know, we have so many other things we could spend money on. And sitting in the audience, the congregation, I suppose I have to call it, right? Last night, I was convinced that much of this is absolutely necessary. When you saw the excitement on people's faces, when they pointed to the various things that they had physically done, because all of it was a labor of love from us. We did every single thing there. And so the narrative has to change to what about us is in this edifice, whatever it is, you know? And I'm going to just start like that. I'm not going to quite answer your question. I know I haven't. But I want to throw that out, that much of what we are talking about in heritage is about us. So I'm going to stop there. And let me go and continue.
I would say that heritage is what people consider important. So if you go to the church, you see it important, you will contribute to the construction of the church, and you will give as much money as you can. So the cost is not necessarily a factor, except when you have to deal with governments. But when you deal with people, as long as they see it as important, they will give it their support. And that is what heritage is. What I believe in is what I live and what I would give.
I think heritage, as it relates to, what we preserve, actually begins with intention. What is the intention? What is the story we are trying to tell about ourselves through these things, through these buildings, through these artifacts? But also, I think heritage is so much broader than inanimate objects. Okay? Heritage also includes our rivers. Heritage includes indigenous plants that are used for medicine. That's all heritage. So I think that we also have to broaden our view of heritage and what's meant to be preserved. And I think actually that the National Trust and the museums have been doing a good job in expanding the idea of what is heritage and where, and even in terms of the tours that the National Heritage is doing now, right? Because I think that primary is a re-education program, because people really don't even understand what their heritage is. They don't even understand it, so they're not moved to protect it. I've literally seen petroglyphs defaced. They're on a trail, and somebody decided to carve an arrow across the petroglyph for no reason at all. And I think it's because people don't see the value, they don't understand. And I think that probably one of the first things that has to happen is some kind of re-education program so that people understand the things that actually make us unique and how that relates to the story we want to tell through the things that we keep as precious.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Maybe, I was going to support you in another story. I tell stories a lot. A while ago, we had the bright thought of taking some school children from a police youth club camp up to what is misnomer, it's called Shakon's Fort, which is, of course, the Charuka Observatory in Laventille. And we decided to take children there. I did not know there were 7-year-olds, so I was horrified when I saw these 7-year-olds appear. And I thought about the little steel ladder that they had to climb up. I thought, what in God's earth? But anyway, they were there. We started, and we went up this ladder, praying all the way. We stood on the top of this thing, and we started to tell a story about the fact that Levant, which is the wind, is how Laventille, and they were feeling the wind while we were talking, yeah? And then we talked about this person, Charuka, who is not ours, really. He was a Spanish astronomer and general and marine person and so on, and how he fixed the meridian, the first line of longitude. Now, the geographers of us would be very excited about that. Don't worry. But we made it really exciting at the time. That the 10, which is in fact going straight through Port of Spain, Trinidad, is because it is linked to Greenwich Meridian, which is 0, and we are 10. And that, in fact, that is how it fixed the new world to the old world in the first place. And that happened right here. So we're talking about that, and they're getting all excited, looking around. They don't even have a clue what we're talking about with meridians. But they began to go to the stones in the fort and began to try to almost pry them out because they're 7 years old, right? And so we switched the conversation to talking about who put these stones there and how they were put and what happened. And they were fascinated. And they stood taller. And we said to them, it is your ancestors who did this. Right? And that is what, when I hear Tracy talking, I think about that kind of thing, that we have to get people to understand that we did a lot of this work, and we talk about how we did it. And we didn't do it with any of the modern tools. That same getting up there with on some kind of ladder to get and place these heavy stones, and how we affix them together, that they are there up to this time. When we're talking about Chiruka Observatory was what, 1793, I think it is. I have to look at the historian. I'm not good at dates. But it's a long time ago, and here is this observatory. And of course, we said to them, guess where Observatory Street got its name? And so we were able to wend the story of people walking from downtown all the way up Observatory Street to the observatory, which isn't quite how you could do it now. But that is the kind of thing that we need to start to do much more, so that we understand. And so now, those 7-year-olds who are probably now much older, if anything happened to that place, they are likely to come and say, no, this is part of us. Yeah.
Well, you make mention of two things that I think are very important. One, education, that the school system must have a process by which people could understand. You go and call a name of petronyms or petrotrips, that's how the students will see it. They wouldn't have a clue of what you're speaking about. But we also cannot put everything in the curriculum that they need to know, and we have a role there for stories. You know, you drive in the back of Laventille and you see a street sign saying Bath Street. The people in the area have no clue about the significance of Bath Street. And it appears at the start and at the end of the street, you have the sign. And so I was taken through there as a shortcut to a meeting I was attending. So I said, hey, but you know this about this street? Not a clue. I said, how come that has been there from, I don't know, everyone? The sign suggests that it is an old wooden sign, but nobody knows anything about Mohammed Bath and the establishment of that. And I think that is very distressing.
Yeah, I just want to jump back in and say, again, to underline these points, experiencing history, heritage in situ is also important, not just for the viewer to appreciate where they are, but for the community to have a sense of pride in where they are. Like often you see just under street signs, mountains of garbage. And you think to yourself, is this the entrance? Is this the image of the community that we want? If we consider the island as our garden, what are we really planting by having that happen, you know? And so I think that people in these communities also need to have a sense of what's there. And so then how are we establishing that, you know? Is it a series of plaques? Is it through these tours which also involve kids in those communities? Like, you know, so I think that we need to think about this in a far more expansive way, and also beyond a single building or beyond a single institution. It's so much broader than that.
I think what each of you all are describing is decolonization on the ground. That's what you all are doing. You all are changing narratives, changing who has access to a lot of these sites. There's a lot of times when we study heritage abroad, there are these neat categories. Tangible heritage means the building and the built environment. Intangible is the cultural, the rhythms, the music, etc. And then you have natural heritage. But for us in a local context, these may not fit neatly in there, and how we engage with them is an important part of that decolonizing practice. Yeah.
I think as well, something that Kara is very familiar with because she managed it, is the business of now trying to mesh our culture and our community to the modern techniques. And Kara knows about the keeping heritage, keeping history above water, keep heritage above water. And that was a project that she managed when she was in a different place, where we were actually using the technology that we have to describe what is likely to be South Keys' fate if the sea level rises even a half a meter, yeah? And what is the fate? And actually creating what it would look like. And it was done right in the middle, and right there we could see differently the South Quay, the PTSC bus terminal, a beautiful building, one of the first buildings that attempted to use iron and concrete in one building, sitting in the middle of this water. It really, now for me, I mean, I know what it would look, I'm imagining it, but for younger people, when it was created like that, and of course she would tell you all about how it was done, it really meant something. And today, right now, we have another project that was launched a few days ago and is now in Exchange Village, a mud mandir, the only one we have that we can find that has been left. And the people there, the community there, are lovingly creating. And why it's so important is because they have created all the reliefs, all the different monuments, you have to call them, in the mud, in the building, and they leap it continuously, and it's a group of them. And what has happened is SIAC, which is another one of these techie people, and again, you notice my age, techie people, have digitized the entire thing so that it's now all over the World Wide Web. That this thing is happening and how it's being done, and they had descriptions and so on. And it was very well done because it's both the community talking about what they want, and I think that will help it also, so that not only will we have towards physical things and so on, and in this case, this community really believes in their mandir, but it's now going to go further than that to the international community. So that's the next one.
Thank you. All right, well, maybe we can move on to talking about repatriation and ownership. So there's a lot of global debates over where objects should go. During the colonial periods, a lot of objects were removed from communities, from their cultural context, and placed far away in different institutions and museums. And thinking about here locally, in our local context, I remember working with Margaret on trying to get some of our fossils repatriated, because many people don't know we have Ice Age fossils that were found in Trinidad, and proving how Trinidad was linked to the mainland during the Ice Age. And they are not housed in Trinidad, they're housed in foreign universities, and realizing the gaps in the policies and the legislation, in just the effort in trying to get that back here. So it raises a lot of questions of who is actually responsible for safeguarding these items, and how do we get them back here safely, and what is the context we wish to discuss around them. So if any of you want to speak on that.
Well, I mean, the practice is, the tradition is certainly, and it has always been, if you have things that belong to other people, you have to give it back, face the court, charge, so that if they have things that don't belong to them, don't come to argue that they could keep it under better conditions than you who made it, send it right back. And I see that as part of reparations. You give people back the things that belong to them.
Absolutely. Margaret goes, yeah, you. I wanted to say absolutely, but also I want to bring it back home again, because artifacts are discovered when people are building houses here.
Yes.
Right? And they keep it, or they give it away.
They mash it up.
They mash it up. They don't care. Right? So there also has to be, that's also extremely important. Like, where is our pride in ourselves? That is just as important. Because how do you then begin some kind of program around getting these things back when we don't care?
Well, we have to let people know, especially people in construction, that you are going to encounter artifacts. They just see it as something in their way. They don't know that is an artifact that has value, yes. And therefore we have to have a system of alerting, particularly people in the construction industry.
Absolutely.
Who just
and I just wanted to, because we're on the topic there, I have my own archives, of course, right?
Go for it.
So I was preparing for this, and I came across this article from a Sunday Express, September 1974, which talks about the disappearance of a necklace which was owned by the Carib Queen. Right? So we also have to think about what's important to different people that make up Trinidad and Tobago. You know, this happened in 1974, and I'm sure this is the first that any of you have heard of it. You see? But it would have been important to indigenous people, right? Something that, you know, has kind of disappeared from the conversation entirely. Nobody even knows about this necklace or why it would have been important. And so when we think about the stuff that we need to get back, we probably find that there's more than we know about as well. You know?
And that leads me to something. When we turn up on a site, you can just see the contractor. Oh my God. Who brought them? Look how much kind of delays I'm going to have now. This is going to be expensive. You know, we went to Tobago to where I probably, you know, it's politically, but there's a new hotel being built and or going to be built, and we turned up, you know, as part of what, and of course it's right on the grounds of one of the oldest forts. But more than the fort, it's layers and layers of history, which Dr. Pemberton will tell you all about. And you could see people thinking, these people are just going to...
An obstruction.
We're an obstruction. And so I think about that because, you know, I don't like to be not liked, you know? Well, sometimes. And so I thought, well, how can I explain and how can I understand what they want and still have them... how can I get them to understand what I want at the same time? And one of the things that we started to talk about was the fact that this hotel had a fabulous opportunity because here it was going to be in an area that if they marketed it as this kind of place where you could go on walks and see things that you've never seen that are thousands of years old maybe, you know, maybe, or at least a few hundred years, and how they could make this hotel experience so different to anywhere else. And we started to talk that. We haven't quite got that traction at all because, you know, again, we're still a nuisance and an obstructionist and so on. But that is the kind of thing. We have to start thinking of ways that will get them to understand that it's not all lost, that we're not telling them they can't use the site at all, but that we want them to we want to challenge them to come up with ways that we can use our heritage to their advantage as well as ours. So I don't know if anybody else wants to talk a little bit about that.
Yes. If we take the Tobago Forest Reserve as an example, one, there are people who live in communities close to the Forest Reserve who have never been in there, around there. We took some students from a school close to the community, and these were Standard 4 children, and many of them had never been to the Forest Reserve. We do not have any proper understanding of the role of this Forest Reserve. It provides, or it used to provide, firm, plentiful, bountiful hunting grounds. As a consequence, there is little life on the ground. You have the birds, yes, but the animals have been virtually hunted out, and I think somebody started up a program, a plantation trying to rear some of those animals. You know, so our understanding of the importance of places and items need to be explained properly to the populations, especially the ones bordering important areas, but also, as we mentioned earlier, to people whose activities, like contractors and people into construction, they come across items that are of importance that they either throw out or put into their houses as pieces of decoration. So we have to look at heritage items seriously. Right now, I can't say that there's evidence of this seriousness coming from an administrative point of view. For last Thursday, there was a celebration of the Forest Reserve, a celebration of the executives. And what are we doing? The general population is not there in the celebration. And so the fact is, you as the administration might think it is an important feature of the island's life, but the mass of the population are not concerned.
Yes, I'm going to jump in and add to that fire, because there was a time I was doing a bit of research in Tobago and discovered that the air conditioning system at the museum had been broken for months. You know the impact that has on artifacts? Months. And in fact, at the Tobago Museum, there's so much more than what's on display. In the back rooms, there is, entire canoes I've seen for myself. Like, we don't really have an idea of the value of some of these things that we have, and we don't have an understanding of how tied that is to national pride. That sense of who we are as Trinidadians, as Tobagonians. It all matters. If we had some sense of pride, maybe we wouldn't be driving our trucks onto the riverbed to hang out. All the time we was walking and, enjoying the cool water on our feet. But now, because we can afford the expensive truck, we're going to take the truck and we're going to drive it onto the riverbed. And then we're going to hang out there with our 5 trucks on the riverbed. Like, where is the care for our natural environment? And they're going to argue with you, because you have a cheap car and your car can't do that. That's why you're angry. And it's the same attitude, I have to say, around what happened with the monument the other day. Okay? Because just because you have the access and you can do it doesn't mean that you can. You could have used that same moment to say, hey, this is this monument, but, people should really be taking more and better care of it. Maybe next time you visit, pick up the garbage, etc. Change the narrative. Don't be like climbing all over it because you can. Where's your sense of pride in what we have, in what we are saying to people? This is Trinidad. These are the things that we hold dear. The population needs to get on board. I don't know. I think there needs to be a greater cooperation between education and history and museums, and there just needs to be some talking together at a higher level.
Certainly, but you spoke about the big trucks, but what about the people, and the people who would argue, we're making a living, we ain't holding up nobody, we're making a living, and they go right by riverbed, seaside, with a truck, selling stuff, and when they finish, they dump all of it right there.
Yes, at Paria Bay. Again, you have to hike to that place or take a boat, and yet people will travel there and leave bags of garbage on the beach. Is there a truck passing there? No. The same way you came over with, your alcohol and your food to enjoy the serenity of the space. Why can't you take the garbage bag with you on the boat that's picking you up?
Especially as it's now lighter, because you've gobbled up everything.
It boggles my mind every time, but literally after Easter, after Carnival, when you go up there, there are bags of garbage. And just think now, that's also turtle nesting grounds, right? So you're leaving broken bottles, rusting tins. So, the turtle is there, flipping up all of this. Come on, guys.
But what is worse, you take a boat and you go to an island pool. You go to the reef store. You can buy on board the boat chow. So you come to an island pool and you have your chow in a plastic glass. and Pomsite have a bad habit of having a seed. When you finish eating, right there. So on the nice, pristine white sand of Nyland Pool, and the clear water shows you signs of human activity. A plastic container and bare Pomsite seeds. So this is a lifeline for people. You are making a living on the boat. Why do you allow vending on the sea? And I mean, it gets worse, because no man's land is now everybody's land. A whole lot of old shacks about the place. Never mind the relationship between the reef, Nyland Pool, and no man's land. That is not in anybody's vision. It is all about making a living.
How much money can we extract?
Honest living, they call it, at the cost of the whole population.
Well, I'm so glad you all brought up a lot about the individuals in our society having to value these things and making these choices. But I want to just shift the conversation a little bit to our institutions, because a lot of times these same individuals look to a ministry or these government agencies, a museum, National Trust, or even NGOs. Certain NGOs have, they look to them to raise the conversation a bit. And I just want to talk about we've lamented a lot about the individual issues, but I'm looking right here next door at the Red House, and I recall when that construction stopped after they found the burial ground underneath, and everybody complained the Red House has been stopped for years, but they said, no, we have to get an assessment to understand what is underneath the Red House and understand it as part of our history and to share that narrative. And I feel so lucky that I was able to attend the reinterning of the bones back into the ground after the analysis was done. And I felt that was such a positive example for our country of how things should be handled, because you all mentioned construction and so on. So from your individual, institutional, and community experiences, do you have any other examples that you can talk about? It could be a positive, it could be other things, but people looking to these institutions to lead the way and have the guidance, whether it be policy or enforcement, or even just like you say, the tours or having the conversations, if you could speak to that a little bit.
Want to start? Okay, I'll start. I'm not, of course, you know where I have been for a very long time. And I think that certainly the tours that the National Trust does all the time, every Saturday almost, the lectures that they do, I think I point to all of those because those things really start to spread the word. But of course, a tour is a very small, amount of people, two buses, 3 buses. I think that kind of thing on an even broader scale would help and has helped tremendously. And what I think is very exciting is that some of the places we go, like Lupino and like Paramin, the community has now almost taken over that tour. In fact, many times I see, what's his name, Carlos? Yeah. And Marlon, yeah, but Carlos, the one from there, yeah. He parked up by Hyatt, picking up a group that he's going to do the exact tour that we're doing. And I feel good because, he has now expanded to doing it for himself as well. So every time he does that, I tell our people, now you have to bring it up a notch because Carlos is doing that. So bring it up a notch so that it'll keep going. Do something different. Come up with some other plays and so on. So I think certainly the tours and the lectures. I don't know if you all know that we have lectures every last Wednesday of a month, usually, and some of us are members, so you know. But the lectures are of all, it's called Tubagai, and that really has helped people kind of think about it a little differently. So those are 2 that I can think of right away, and I'm sure I'll find some more as we talk. Go ahead.
Yes, I think tour guides need to be properly trained.
Yes.
I mean, right now, almost anybody can become a tour guide. And carry people, sometimes give them incorrect information.
Sometimes
but
lose
them.
At least... Sometimes literally lose them in the forest.
Yeah, but at least it would be a means of sensitizing more people to the value of things in their communities and in the areas where they want to carry people, visitors to see, So I think we have to do something about that. It is too easy to become a tour guide, and sometimes the information passed on is not correct. But certainly it's an area we could use to enhance our ability to sensitize people about what is important in and around their communities.
I actually really want to applaud the work of the National Trust and your work, Margaret. Because I think that the approach in terms of taking things to the community, sharing those communities with people, the lecture series, even the social media storytelling, all very essential to overcoming some of these barriers. And I'm also aware of the fact that your funding is not inexhaustible.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Right? Yeah. So, yeah, maybe you intend to preserve this building. Like I think of, in my neighborhood, there's the old ice factory in Arima.
Yes.
One of the oldest ever, right? And I mean, my personal history is tied to that too. My grandmother used to work in that factory along with her sisters. So, I mean, the thing about it is that because of a lack of funding, there are things that they are unable to do in the time frame that they set. But that doesn't mean that they've then sat on their hands. They've then thought of ways to achieve other things in their program that they need to. And I really applaud that work because it's so essential. And also bridging the age gap. Because, a lot of people think, well, only older people really think or care about heritage.
Yes.
So it's really important for young people to get the message of why it's important. When I was growing up in this indigenous community, my grandmother didn't even, she was like, don't pee in the river. Don't even pee in the river. No impurity is meant to go in the river, right? And I distinctly remember it was in the 80s. I'm in the river. There's a piece of galvanized in the river. There's a child's car seat in the river. A piece of a Christmas tree. And so I think that it's also about that. It's also about how do we really, in our small ways, make sure that the message is carried. I'd like to see more publications too, actually.
Yeah. Well, I want to say that all of the tours and all of the lectures are all done without government funding whatsoever. It's all on their own. So that we say to people, it can be done. And I would like to throw this out. This is one of the things that you will comment when it's time to comment, because I know it's not going to be just us talking here. But one of the things that people tell us all the time, especially from the other islands, is the problem with you all is that you don't have tourists. If you had tourists, you would have everything done. And I really cringe with that. I keep thinking, no, it's us. So we need to talk a little bit about that, because yes, all of those tours are fully funded by the tour itself. So that it means that you can, in fact, do a lot more with that. The buildings now are another matter, because of course, but then we have a heritage tax that allows businessmen to be able to give and get back. So that there are things like that are being tried, but there are many other things that we can do. I look at buildings. I shouldn't say anything about. I'm not marketing for anybody, but I think Full Bloom is here. I saw Full Bloom only because I was looking at the caffeine, But anyway, Full Bloom is in a heritage building. That heritage building, no government paid 1 cent for the restoration of that building. And it's in a heritage building. And it's amazing how people say they go there. I don't know if the coffee is bad, good, or indifferent. I really don't know. But they go there because of the atmosphere, the feel, the way they are. They're in a place that was there. And sometimes they get the story of Audrey Jeffers, who was the first woman, really, of any kind of stature, black woman, to own a property in a place like St. Clair. And lift us all with that. And when you hear that and you see the building and you see people just having their coffee, So there are a lot of opportunities for everyone to come up with ways of keeping our heritage alive and well without depending on the government. And I think we have to start to remember all of those, because after all, we can't do enough with what we have from the state.
I think those are really good examples of what people can do without the assistance and fully funded opportunities to start from scratch and build out tours, because I remember the National Trust really started from scratch with that one and built an audience.
Marlon, I always give a shout out to Marlon, who was there. I met him there in 2013, and he's still there. And he still looks young. Amazing. He is young. That's probably why he's there. But there are many others. Yeah. I mean, if you walk into the building at National Trust, you see young people, you know, and it's really exciting that so many of them have seen that this is really something absolutely important.
I just want to raise a little caution with tourism.
Oh, yeah.
I find tourism a very caustic, and it is very corrosive on your culture, heritage, and tradition, and it should be controlled. As it stands now in Trinidad and Tobago, we don't really have any controls, or any of the controls that we need. And on some of the islands, in Tortola, for example, you can't remove a conch shell. So right in the immigration, there's a sign and a list with an illustration. You can't leave with this, that, or the other. But tourists love to go with items that demonstrate that they have come to the tropics, apart from the tan that they might or might not have had. But they have this little piece that they will sneak out, and what they're doing to us is worse than what they think they're doing for themselves. So with the cruise tourism, in other forms of culture and tradition, the food, the dress, the habits, all those need to be controlled. All those have to do with how we see ourselves. Sometimes, I'm back to the Tobago examples. Sometimes they are happy to say, oh, but everybody little children pass and say good morning. And they say good morning to you, but you didn't think you should say good morning to them in the first instance. And that is part of being us. And, you know, you serving food, and some have a curio for, let me taste a little piece of that, and what is this? But no, I prefer that, and the spaghetti and the pasta stuff, you know, and leading people to produce that for them at the expense of your traditions. But I just want to raise the crab issue. So there's an association of Tobago with curry crab and dumpling. There used to be a lot of crabs all over, and the crabs used to have a period when the crabs would run. And when the crabs ran, everybody was out there with a little bag collecting the crab. But now, the crabs neither run nor walk. I think they hide in. But crab and dumpling is being sold in Trinidad. Trinidad have some hairy crab that come from the river. I'm not eating that, to tell you the truth. In Tobago, the tradition is you take your crab, you catch your crab, you put them in a container, but you have to give them some pepper leaves. They have to purge the crab before you cook it. Well, I don't know if them curry hairy crab get any purging. I'm not about to find out. But what I'm saying to you, for the appearance, you know, so you can buy crab and dumpling in Trinidad and in the malls, actually, now. So once I asked, did you purge this crab? She looked at me. She had no idea what I was speaking about. I said, thank you, you've answered my question. But you know, it's in every activity, you have to establish, this is me. We eat crab, we purge crab before we eat it. We don't even know hairy crab, we eat smooth skin, blue or gray crab. But you know, And on the other hand, what are the authorities doing about the crab population? Because since it is so popular, such a popular food item, the demand is heavy. The poor crabs have no pills that they could take to increase the population. So you have to manage this crab operation to make sure that there's a continuous supply.
But I want to say something else about tourism, though. You know, what we have found is that it is our diaspora, that if we do want to bring people to Trinidad and Tobago, start with the diaspora. There are more people, Trinidad and Tobagonians, outside there than inside. And that is a group of people, and all of us, everyone in this room, has somebody or somebodies who is outside. And they're the people you need to bring back. They're the people who have lived in their cold, hard, sad place, or dry, because a lot of them are in Arab Emirates and all kinds of places, dry or cold. It's not us. It's not Trinidad. And when you invite them back, and you keep encouraging them to come back, have a program for them. Call us and say, hey, I have my aunts and two things. This one don't want to walk and no big hike, sorry. Can't get up in them waterfall and so on. But what else you have? Call us. We'll create something for that person, you know? But you can do it yourself. You can say, you know, how many of them have been, it's not just Maracas Bay. It's everywhere, all over the country. And sometimes what I find is that when I have my family and friends and so on from abroad coming in, I am rediscovering my own place. I am excited because I look at what they say, you know. I send out, and you send things out, like you send out beautiful video with the pui trees around the savannah, you know, the pink pui, including ours at Millefleur and so on. That is the kind of image that we need to start, and everybody in this room could do that. Start to understand who we are and very, very boldly advertise it. And that is a group that I can see coming in. I don't know if you can call them tourists, but... Yeah.
I think you're also talking about access, right? Who has access to the story and what kind of access are they having? And I think that's why I was saying earlier that things like publications are important. Things like prints are important. When you visit the museum, what can you take with you that you can then have on your living room wall, and then you can talk to someone about this? What's on your coffee table? What are those books saying? So I also think that we need to also think of those ways in terms of how accessible are these stories, you know? We're curating experiences in situ in institutions and in communities, but then we also have to think about how are those stories traveling, you know, in ways that are really like cement.
Yeah, and that brings us to the discussion of monuments and public spaces, because you can see that when we travel abroad, nobody's more Trini than us. We sort of portray this you're more Trini, you want to tell everybody about Trinidad and Tobago. Sorry. You want to tell everybody about it. And then sometimes, like Margaret said, you come back and visit and say, oh, I didn't know we had mud volcanoes in Trinidad, and we had so many. I just know the one, maybe Devil's Woodyard, Piparo, and I didn't know we had so many. So you have those kind of discussions. But in terms of our built landscape, a lot of these things were colonial legacies. Just the way these streets right here in downtown Port of Spain were laid out. We did not have, this generation, we did not have control over that. This grid was done by the British. The layout, the changing of the river, putting East Dry River from the center over to the side of the city, the naming of the streets, as now it's still somewhat named after the monarchy. You know, we started with King Street, which has now been renamed Independence Square. Then you had Queen, Prince, and Duke. Well, Queen is now renamed Janelle Penny Commission. So there's a lot of spaces that are also contested spaces in Trinidad. So what should we do with some of these monuments and places that have names that people are calling for reinterpretation, or at least an open discussion about the realities of how this came to be and what we are choosing for our future?
What we are choosing for our future is to have our street names and our public buildings identify the persons who contributed to the development, some of our heroes and heroines.
Absolutely.
I don't understand Lady Young, precisely what was her contribution to the nation, apart from being companion for her husband. Well, I
You're
didn't
so
know
right.
about that. But,
You're so right.
huh?
You're so right.
Apart from that.
No, I mean about the renaming of things for
Yeah.
heroes.
Who was the engineer, or who were the engineers or the people who constructed that street?
Well, before Margaret jumps in, I know, Rita, you were on that committee for the renaming of streets and statues and things. So I know you all did a public call for people's opinions. Do you want to? Are you able to share some of that information that you gathered from what people said?
Public support was there for the input from people in communities to naming buildings and streets after persons that they considered contributors to their development. That came out abundantly clear. And, well, of course, center of the conversation was Columbus. And there are varying views about the Columbus statue. I don't think anybody would disagree that Columbus and his story, we know now that some things in so-called records were not quite accurate. And if we see Columbus as playing an important part in the country, do we still see Columbus as somebody who should have an elevated position in the center of our capital? Right? That is the issue that most people had. I don't think we need to destroy, but we certainly need to have somebody up there who we all recognize and we all respect. We don't all respect Columbus, we cannot, because the indigenous people have suffered, and the stories that happened subsequent to his present have contributed to a lot of pain for people in the society. We could keep Columbus there, identify his role, but put him in a place that does not show that kind of elevation in the community. So the history has to be put in proper context and that people could understand. So, and I have the same issue. It was raised with respect to Lady Young Road, right? Why are we naming it after somebody's wife? She might have done her little welfare things. But there are other people, the people who contributed to the construction and labored, and some information suggests that Mohammed Bach was part of that process. So we could find people from the ground, from, like a small fry about the place, making our little bits and pieces and contributing in our little ways. But everybody cannot be named at the building and so on. But those who are honored with such names should be persons who deserve it in terms of what they have done for their country and communities.
I think what that whole experience taught me was the importance of learning the facts. Part of it is like Picton Street. Thank God I don't live on Picton Street, because now I know about Picton. I could not live on Picton Street, right? So that the people of Picton Street, same thing with the war generals in Woodbrook, Buller and Roberts and Kitchener and all of these war generals from Britain who decimated people in the African continent. And to think that these are the names that we have revered. Why? Because we were curry favoring at the time to the British, and we put these names. Now, of course, there's a whole lot of trouble to get it changed because you have all the legal things. Everybody deed says Bola, and how are you going to change that and so on. We are smart people. We can figure that out. But I think the question is, do we know about a lot of this? And even when we are naming, because we run quick, we say we're going to name something. And people say, who's Prada? I don't know about Prada. Let's talk about who Prada was. The first mayor of Port of Spain. Dr. Prada, one of the first island scholars, who was, by the way, from Venezuela. but that is who he is. So we need to know who these people are, why we did it. And then, do we rush to name from people? Because people kind of fall out of favor. Or is it that we want to name out of our aspirations? So that Independence Square, unless we change it to Republic Square, I suppose we could do that. But the thing is, it means something. It has nothing to do with a person, And so that is part of what we need to start to do. And all of us can participate with that. Look at your own street. Get the information. Get the information of your own street and decide if that is a place that you really want to keep. I mean, some things a long circular road is because it's a long circular road. You know what I mean? That's cool. So that's okay. But it's especially the people. And in terms of Columbus, I listened to the whole debate and so on, and there is a story that we can tell about him in a different space, in the museum. We can have a story about Columbus. That's not a problem. And the anchor that we think was one of his anchors. And there's some things that we know because the historians among us will laugh when we see Nina Pinta and Santa Maria, when they had all drowned and shipwrecked long before us and so on. So that is the kind of thing that we didn't know before. And we now know, and we can know more. And we have historians. I mean, we have Bridget Brereton in the audience. I'm so pleased to see you again. And we have Dr. Pemberton right here. And we have many people who can tell us and who have done the work. And we have many more, especially young people, who I want to hear you say, why was this? Who is this person that I am living on the street? What? Let me see if I could find out. Let me go and Google. That's the first thing people do. So I think that's again what we have to do.
Let me just interject. The population, the people from Bulla Street and all of those areas requested that the names be changed. Because once they found out what was the basis of the activity for those persons who they held in such esteem with a street name, they want them removed. But we had another case, which is from Diego Martin. Those people on those streets, one street was named Pregnancy Lane, Hornaman Street, and oh gosh, I forget the third one. They did not want the name changed. So we had a student on the campus, and she said when she had to write her address, she used her aunt's address because she didn't want to have to write Pregnancy Lane. And she said, Miss, they always have somebody in there pregnant. But the thing is, in most communities, people have very serious. I'm not saying that those people were serious because, the man must have been serious. But the people have very strong sentiments. There was an area in Tobago, part of an estate, and the streets were named after women. And it was named after women who used to be home because the men went out to the garden. So Miss Sarah Street, Miss Jane Street, and if you go there, Miss Jane and Miss Sarah home to attend to whatever. And then when the administration changed the community organization. They changed the names, causing lots of confusion, because when you know, if you walk in and you turn right, you get to Sarah Street, or if you turn left, you get to Margaret Street, that went out the window. A lot of confusion before it became established, those street names.
I just wanted to say, yes, I agree with the recontextualization, and also that word, who we're elevating, the elevation is extremely important. But I also want to say that we can even broaden the devices we use in remembrance. You know, in some places, there are plaques put on buildings where people would have lived or where someone was born. Not every street has to be renamed, but there must be different devices that we employ to remember those people that we want to elevate. You know, who's having a retrospective at the museum? You know, is it Earl? Is it Mailing? Is it Dialan? Like, you know, like there are so many people and stories that are invisible. And our people are also an important part of our heritage.
So on that important note of elevating stories, we have a little bit of time, so I want to open up to the audience. If anyone has any questions, all right, I see you immediately, Dr. Reddock. We're going to start there, and there. So 1, 2, 3. Go ahead. 1, 2, and 3. No, here in front, the second row, in blue.
Yes, oh, sorry, thanks. Yes, because I think we've just started the conversation. I just wanted to mention a few points. First of all, I think that a lot of the discussion has really exonerated the state and the responsibility of the state to manage these issues in a number of ways. I remember going to Barbados once, speaking to an engineer, and he was saying that if they were doing a construction and they met by law, they had to report it. Now, he said he knows of people sometimes who quietly don't do it. But I got the impression that this law was actually being implemented. So I think our legislative framework really needs a lot of attention in relation to these issues. But more important, we need a framework that is implemented. We know our planning system seems to have gone awry. They have lost their direction. We are in an extremely unplanned and haphazard society. And planning also has a role in terms of heritage. I think also the signage you spoke about, signage can do a lot. Even if you say you remove Lady Young, you can say Lady Young who she was and why it was. You know, you can have historical signage throughout the country. That's very important. Also, regulations and monitoring and information, that's very important as well. But the most important, I think, is the absence of historical knowledge in our society. Because there's so many myths and misinformation that get roped out when we have festivals, you know, and it's very embarrassing. And I really think for a country whose first prime minister was a historian, something went wrong along the way to have such a historically bereft society. And most of our students do not, many of our schools have stopped teaching history. I did history in primary school. Many schools don't teach history. And in schools that teach history, students are advised do not take history because it's very difficult to get a 1 or A. That is the criteria for learning and education in our society. The next point I wanted to make has to do with attitudes to public space. And I think this is something that anthropologists could probably study, because for many people, the space for which they're responsible is their private space in their house. And even if it's outside of the road, that belongs to someone else. So I think it's also having a social, responsible attitude that we think about others and not only. That is an education issue, a sensitization issue, and a whole ownership of social and public space. Talking about Lady Young, I've seen the deterioration of that once scenic road, the destruction, the unplanned development. It's a mess. And I think that the various institutions have to accept responsibility. And finally, I think heritage education has to be both formal in schools and universities, but also on radio, on calling, on different ways. Thank you very much.
The gentleman in fourth row. It is on.
I'm Robert Lee. I'm an old age pensioner with a history hobby. Couple of things. First thing, added to the destruction of the Buckaroo Reef and Nagaland Pool, may I also add sound sort of pollution, where these tour boats come and just blast music, scares the fish away, and then they drop anchors over the reef and kill it. No man's land, as you said, it's gone. Second thing is, this year will mark the 220th anniversary of the arrival of the first Chinese to the country. Not many Chinese came, but the ones that did, most of them went back. I know the National Trust is planning some sort of celebrations, and I would like to propose that among the celebrations, it be viewed through the lens of a Trinidadian, not of the Chinese. So while they might want dragon dance or lion dance or some stupidness like that, I would like to see a photographic survey of those Trinidadians of Chinese descent under the theme of how they became us. And this could be used for any of the communities in the country, not just the Chinese. And so to bring home to the part of the history's in our genes, not only in our culture, but we are actually living embodiments of where we came from. And finally, I have no problems with the Columbus statue. I think maybe others like Professor Burton might confirm this. I don't think the great man actually stepped on shore. He was supposed to be sick at the time. But one guy who did, the first man of color, stepped on shore, and we should put a statue to him. Juan Pedro Alonso was a peninsulari of Moorish descent, and we can actually claim the first documented arrival of the black man in this island. I think we should have a statue to him. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, good. Hello. Hi. Thank you so much for everything that you have said and also for all of your life's work. All four of you, thank you very much. I really kind of want to put this discussion today a bit in conversation with things that happened yesterday at POCUS, namely the panel on what does the Caribbean still mean, and then the Tricanal event in the evening. I think what I gather from what we've been discussing here is that, you've talked about heritage is what the people say is important. And yesterday what Suniti was trying to elucidate is that the Caribbean means what we decide that it means. And I would say the other speakers had a different view. And that whole conversation oriented very much around the concept of the Caribbean as a formation of states. I found that it conflated CARICOM with the Caribbean for most of it. And I found that the focus was on, the Caribbean as a place that crime happens, and that there was historical crime, and now there's contemporary crime. And there was nothing I found in that discussion about the culture of the Caribbean, which is what I came into it expecting. I didn't know much about the other speakers besides Suniti. But I also want to bring into conversation what Raymond Rancharita did last night at the Tricanal discussion, where he called their music, I know this is his shtick, but he called their music repetitive and pastiche, and he found that he said they copied Explainer in one of their recent songs, right? Sedition, they license them out, they don't want me talk. He's saying they're copying, right? And of course, anybody who understands Afro-diasporic musical culture understands what it means to bring those things into the present and to reiterate our culture and history. So I was thinking also about how Tracy was talking about we have to broaden the devices that we use in remembrance, and I would say that is one of them. That is one of the most important ones. I think Tricanal has carried that throughout their musical career, is this bringing our musical history back into their musical creations, which are new musical creations. I also want to say that Mr. Ramcharita is coming from a place of, I don't know if he's here, I would love if he was, but I don't know if he understands that, because I thought about lots, he was standing right behind me when he made his offensive comments. But sorry, this isn't a question. This is I'm accepting what you all have done and trying to bring the Bocas conversation together and all of the events. I wanted to tell him he should be shamed to come there in the black box and do that. But I think Wendell did, a sufficient job. But it is shame that I think keeps us back from understanding that our heritage needs to be preserved. It is shame that is why people don't know that they should value these things when they find it, and I find it difficult to speak. I don't know if this maybe could be the question, how to speak to contractors and engineers and those people who believe that we have to terraform this world in a different image to make something new, because they don't understand what they have come from and they don't understand what has shaped them, and they actually have shame about that. So how I can understand how we can do it with children. I can understand how we could carry children on field trips and we could have little, arts and crafts sessions.
I think I'll let Margaret answer your question.
Yes,
Thank you.
but how do we work with the shame that the adults in our society have and the contempt for our own culture?
I think Margaret.
I forgot about the mic. Okay, I know that we're almost ready to wrap up, and it's always very nerve-wracking when for the moderator. I'm sorry for you right now because we've probably gone over time. But I think that it's a matter of continuing to do whatever you can do. Just keep it up. Just keep it up. I mean, we have our venerable here, should I name you at all, who every time I see him, I think of his voice on 610. It was 610? 610? Yes. And that will age out a lot of us. But anyway, and that voice, and we have a very young person who was able to bring back the tapes of the radio, speaking about that particular time. This is 1970 now, so are you serious? 1990, sorry, 1990. Lord, I'm really old. Yeah, 1990. And this speaking of it, and I think that was just one person doing it. And everybody here can do something. And that's what I really want to say. I think we can't do it any other way. Yeah?
I think that's good final words. So I just want to ask Tracy and Rita if you have any final lines you want to leave the audience with today based on our Big Ideas panel.
I just think that we need to believe in the magic of who we are.
We need to keep remembering who we are, and we need to live it the way we have been accustomed to.
All right. And with those words, thank you all very much. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Margaret, Tracy, Rita. Thank you.
And please, also a round of applause for Kara for stewarding this conversation. And thank you all for being here for what is clearly a discussion that needs to happen in many different forms, many different times, many different places. So a couple things. As I mentioned earlier when I was up here, this is a kind of a two-part morning. So our Big Ideas panel will now vacate the stage in a minute. But the next part of this two-parter, which is going to start in just about 5 minutes, is a session called Objects of Memory. And let me tell you why that's interesting and why it's so special. So the National Museum has their collections in storage at the moment. Maybe some of you visited the museum often when you were younger, like me, maybe you have a favorite object from the museum collection. They're all safely locked up, waiting for the building to reopen. However, what the museum has done in partnership with Bocas is we've chosen 4 objects, 4 artifacts from their collection. Maybe they're not exactly the kinds of objects you might expect. And for each object, we've paired it off with a writer, and we've asked them to tell a story. And sometimes the stories are personal. One is for one writer, the object brought up personal memories. For the other two of them, it's a completely fictionalized story based on the object. The third one is going to be a spoken word performance. We're going to have the actual objects here. They've been brought out of storage. So this plinth over here is not just to tell you that the National Museum is involved. The objects will be there. One of them is actually quite large. And then we're going to have the writers who are going to present their pieces. And I think one of the reasons that's so important is that the objects, just as physical objects, don't mean very much. What's important is what we invest in them, the significance of them, the stories that we get from them. And so being able to take these things, which would otherwise be sitting in a glass case, in a gallery somewhere, and actually bring them to life through creative work, I think is one of the ways that we can appreciate what our heritage means, interrogate what our heritage means, and basically share it. It's about the stories, not about the objects themselves. Anyway, but let me not get ahead of myself. We will be starting that session in just about 5 minutes. So if you're going to go and grab a cup of coffee or something like that, please come back. I also want to say that when that session is over, please remember, or maybe you don't even know, we actually have a small art exhibition here at the festival by the artist Shalini Siriram, who's our official festival artist and who did our official festival poster. It's a small exhibition, very beautiful. It is in the foyer of the library AV room, so inside and downstairs. So please go and visit that at some point during the day. Last thing to say is, if you had a wonderful time at this session and you want us to continue to do events like this at the Bocas Lit Fest in the future, there is a donation box at the door. Feel free to drop I won't say drop your coins in it. We can't do much with coins these days, but feel free to drop some spare bills in it and help us keep the festival going. So thank you once more again to all the speakers, to Kara, and we'll be back here in 5 minutes.